Hi all, so this is my ranking video for fiction group of BookTube prize Octofinals. I read all 6 books in March, and I read Group G, which I think was a really nice group, I would say. Overall, most of the books were quite decent. Except for one, which I didn't particularly enjoy. But I will talk about those, soon. In fact, now. Let's start with the book that I put at number 6. Anyway, at number 6, I put Fellowship Point by Elliott Dark. I didn't really enjoy this one, although judging by the reviews on Goodreads, quite a lot of people like this book. So Fellowship Point is about these two elderly women, who live in a place called Fellowship Point, somewhere in Maine. So one of those women is named Agnes, and she is a successful author who has cancer. And another woman is her best friend named Polly, who has her own issues to deal with. The main plot of this book pretty much concerns about the future of this piece of land called Fellowship Point, which happens to be co-owned by Agnes's family, but also by other families. And apparently something is going to happen to Fellowship Point, which Agnes does not want to happen, because she has a certain concern, a concern that is of that is related to nature, regarding Fellowship Point. So she is trying to work out a way in order to avert that concern by doing something about the ownership of Fellowship Point. And in order for her to do so, she has to sort of navigate through legal means and stuff. And in this novel, we also learn about the history of how Fellowship Point, the ownership of Fellowship Point comes to be, its history and all that, and how it ties to various characters in this book, including the main character Agnes. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of like the main story. There are also other subplots in this book, which I'm not going to include. But anyway, I didn't particularly enjoy reading this book because okay, let's start with the positive. I would say I like the atmosphere of this book. It is a quiet kind of a book. It is a calming kind of a book. The writing definitely reflects that. But other than that, I was not really enjoying it. The writing, I thought, was somewhat, it was okay, it was nice, but it felt like it lacked a bit of that strong voice or rhythm, which didn't really grab my attention. I also find that this book features a lot of preachiness, I would say. The story would include quite a few moments in which the characters go into this preachy mode, standing on soapboxes, talking about certain things that certain beliefs that they believe in. And even though I agree with their beliefs, I think that it really disrupts the flow of the story, which is already quite slow. And when you add that into the mix, it becomes even more draggy. So it wasn't really enjoyable for me. And lastly, I thought that the ending was kind of bizarre. So for the most part, most of the characters that we see in this book are characters who are from rich family, wealthy families, right? They are somewhat, a bit of an old money kind of people, And so there's already this kind of this image or impression that we are dealing with characters who wield certain power in their lives, in their society. And the ending of this book include involvement of Native American characters. So you could sort of see where this is going. I find the inclusion of the Native American characters at the ending, where they sort of become pivotal to the ending of the book, feels a bit jarring, because at least like half of the first half of this book, Native American characters were absent. And so it just feels weird, like somehow it feels like they come from nowhere and suddenly they're there. It almost feels like a bit of a Deus Ex Machina, where they conveniently help resolve the main dilemma of the story, which is about Agnes's concern with Fellowship Point, and also the fact that the inclusion of the Native American characters at the ending kind of feels it carries a hint of this kind of I would say noble savage cliche. It's not really heavy, but there's a bit of it, and I'm a little sensitive towards that, because it's just strange, and especially considering that Group G is really heavy on Native American representation. Like, we literally have 2 other books in this group that are about Native American people, written by Native American writers. And I happened to read Fellowship Point the last, which meant that I read those 2 books before this, and when I got to the ending of Fellowship Point, it just felt strange, a little tone deaf. So yeah, that's my, those are my thoughts on Fellowship Point. Moving on to the next one. Number 5, I have Night of the Living Rez by Morgan Talty. So starting from this book, and with the rest of the other books, I would say now we're getting to a decent territory. I kind of like this book. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. So this book is a short story collection, and it's about this young boy. Well, not young boy. Like, half of the stories are about this person as a young boy, and the other half of the collection, the stories are about this person as an adult man. So we have this character named David, who is a Penobscot boy / man, depending on the stories. It's basically about his life with his mom, his sister, his sort of absent father, and also his mom's boyfriend. Occasionally we also see the presence of his friend when he's an adult, named Felice, and also his grandmother would make an appearance also in some of the stories. So basically all of these stories are written through the point of view of David, some as a young boy, some as an adult man. And I find that the structure is really interesting, because that means all of these stories are interconnected with one another. They all occur within the same universe. So in a way, you could see this short story collection as a kind of novel, which is, again, really interesting. But the thing is that most of these stories, they seem to carry similar tones. And they seem to, in terms of themes, right, they seem to carry similar kinds of themes as well. And because of how similar they feel with one another, it seems like these short stories just feel kind of repetitive. Like this collection feels kind of repetitive if you read these short stories successively. It would probably be more effective if you read the stories independent of one another, isolated from one another. You read them as standalone, like strong standalone, and then maybe give it some time and read another story. But that was not what I did with this book. I read the stories in sequence, and so because the stories sound the same as a collection, it doesn't really have that that up and those ups and downs, the kind of rhythm that you could expect in a kind of like novel length work. So yeah, because of this, I put it at number 5. Going to number 4, we have a book by Vaishnavi Patel. This is Kaikeyi. This book I gave 3 out of 5 stars, and this book feels very different from the rest of the group. You know what? I think all of the books are unique in their own ways. But this one is very different in terms of the language that it uses. It, unlike most of the books in this group, it is not something that I would call like a really something that you would label as like a really strong literary fiction, as opposed to other books. This book does not really attempt to go that literary route. Rather, it is more plot driven, and I think that is also the strength of Kaikeyi. And that is, it has a really gripping plot. Now, if you don't know what Kaikeyi is about, it's about this character who is from the Ramayana epic. Kaikeyi is she's not like the biological mom of Rama, but she's like kind of one of the moms of Rama, basically. And she is the one who is responsible for, according to the epic, she's the one responsible for exiling Rama to many years in the forest. And that is why she's like one of the kind of like disliked characters in the Ramayana epic. So this is, in this novel, we explore her story, starting as she is a young girl and how she grows up in a world which is quite patriarchal and a world that does not respect women's lives, and how she's able to survive that and find her way into a powerful position later in life in a different country, beside a powerful king. I would say, positive, of course. I mentioned the plot is very nice, but then at the same time, I think the characterization of Kaikeyi in this book just it doesn't feel very strong. She feels almost like a Mary Sue kind of character, where most of the things that happen to her in this book are things that happen to her. And they happen to her because of the world that she lives in, the world that doesn't really respect women and women's agency. And there are some parts where she does take action and drive the plot, but I wouldn't say that that's the bulk of the novel. I think a lot of the things in this book just sort of something that happens to her, even including the parts where this character falters. It's all because of things that happen to her. So in terms of characterization, I don't think it's really strong. At the same time, there's this kind of feeling that the progressivism in this book, the progressive ideas that are injected into this book feels a little bit, maybe a little bit too heavy-handed. And especially as someone who is a 21st century reader, you could recognize when something just feels a little bit anachronistic. And it can get jarring sometimes, because occasionally I would forget that this book does not take place in our current time. But at the same time, I do appreciate the fact that, you know, it's entirely possible that some readers may find the inclusion of these progressive ideas comforting for them. But yeah, it does feel kind of jarring sometimes when we consider the fact that this story is supposed to take place in mythical ancient India, right? And yeah, it just feels a bit strange to me. Now moving on to number 3. So at number 3 I have Dr. No by Percival Everett. This is my first book by Percival Everett. He was like really hot on BookTube like last year or last 2 years with The Trees. I really love satirical books, and I really love books that have a lot of surreal jokes. So what happens in Dr. No is that we have this this professor, a math professor who specializes in the concept of nothing. He's approached by a black man named John Sill. Now this professor, his name is Walakitu. So Dr. Walakitu is approached by John Sill, who has a certain trauma that he experiences in the past, and he feels angry about it. And he approaches Dr. Walakitu because he wants him to help him to rob something from the government of the United States. And and it gets really interesting and fascinating when you find out that this book is pretty much a parody of James Bond, you know, the James Bond franchises. I'm not really familiar with the James Bond world. I have not watched the movies, believe it or not, and I've not read the books, but I think we can say that some of the elements, some of the tropes associated with the James Bond franchise just trickle down to some of us who are kind of unaware through pop culture osmosis. So you can in fact recognize some of those elements in this book, especially the more surreal, the more flamboyant, outlandish aspect of the James Bond stories, you know, such as someone being killed in a shark tank or something like that, you know, and also really outlandish henchmen. I find that this book, it likes to do really a lot of pun-based jokes, based on the word nothing, or the concept of nothing, and it gets really interesting at first, but after a while it sort of becomes a little bit tired, because I find that the joke is stretched a little too thin. So in, you know, from the point of view of using nothing as a joke, right, this book may be a little bit too long. Once in a while you also get some, I would say, quite obvious commentaries on the discriminations that Black Americans face in their country as well. In fact, that is kind of like the main motivation of the this character of John Sill in this book. That's pretty much his backbone as a character in this book also. So this book is really interesting in that sense. It has a lot of funny moments, isolated funny moments that really got me laughing out loud. But other than that, I just feel like, you know, this book is a little too long when it comes to its comedy. But I really love the final chapter. So if you want to read this book, make sure you get to the final chapter. I really love that. Anyway, next. So for number 2, I have Calling for a Blanket Dance by Oscar Hokeah. This book is very well written. It is about this man named Everett, and he is someone of Kiowa, Cherokee, and Mexican descent. So he has all of these heritage that he inherits from different sides of his family. And it's pretty much about how his life sort of unfolds since he is a baby all the way until he is an adult with children. So this story is written in multiple chapters, and each of the chapters are narrated by a different character. And what's great about this is that each chapter, because they're narrated by different characters, the author is able to make each narrator sound sufficiently different from one another, sufficiently distinct that you can really hear the story being told through the voices of different people. So I really appreciate that. I really like it. And this story is the main theme of this novel is intergenerational trauma, and we see a lot of, I would say, unpleasant things happen to Ever, you know, because he's the main character. We see a lot of unpleasant things happening to him, and basically he has to deal with these things. And he responds to these things in different ways. And because we see this story through multiple eyes, we end up with multiple accounts on whoever is as a person. The ending, the last chapter of this book is told through his point of view. So we get that eventually. But I find it really fascinating that this story is able to kind of but this story can be seen, or rather we can look at the story through different point of views, and somehow those point of views, they sort of converge because those point of views see different side of this same main character. And I really like the way that this novel does that. Another thing that I really like about this novel is that the writing style and the voice, it uses a lot of non-English words from Kiowa, Cherokee, and also Spanish. And it does so in a way that feels really liberal and free, like as if you can really imagine how, you know, those narrators are literally talking to you, narrating the story, and it feels really natural. And the fact that they use these words in a way that just comes off as really natural to me. It feels very flowy. It doesn't feel forced, and at the same time you can feel the pride in this book. You know, how this book is very proud about telling its story, and I really like that. So at number 1 we have Julie Otsuka's The Swimmers. I think this one is probably the most unique in terms of the choice of voice and structure in Group G. So I would usually, not usually, I like to see this book as split into two halves. So the first half, that arbitrary first half, we have this novel talking about a group of swimmers who usually come to an underground swimming pool, and basically this part is written using the first person plural point of view, which I think is really interesting. So at the same time, it also feels kind of, there's this kind of distance between the readers and the main characters, the we in this book, which are the group of swimmers. And this first half generally concerns itself with this idea that we are a group of people who finds solace and comfort in a particular enclave in a world, that is the swimming pool. And I think this first half really captures that idea of a safe space, and I think it does so in this really effective way, but at the same time, really reminding us, that the readers, that hey, this is our story, this is us, you are not included in the we. But at the same time, you don't feel alienated, right? The voice doesn't really come across as standoffish, but there is this really firm line that it tries to tell you that, this is our story, and this is where we feel comfortable, and then this is how our story progresses. I'm not going to tell you how the story progresses, but I will talk about what happens in the second half, the arbitrary second half, where the book now focuses on one of the members in that we, the swimmers. Her name is Alice, and she's somewhat of an older woman. She has this issue with her memory that is causing quite a problem with her life, especially with her family also. And this part becomes really heartbreaking when we learn that Alice as a person, she's just trying to live her life, and because of the thing that happens in the first half, the way that she lives her life in the second half is now affected in such a way that it feels somewhat tragic. And the second part, in terms of its voice, is all kind of interesting. It is written in this second person POV. So in different chapters, it uses the word you, addressing the reader, but the reader is someone in the book. So you sort of become a person in the book. However, you might not be the same person in different chapters. So I find it really interesting because just the way that it involves the reader into the story, but at the same time it still manages to puts a line between the story and the reader, while telling the readers that, hey, you are part of the story, but at the same time you are still the reader. You know what I mean? And I find that that style really interesting. I really enjoy it. I think it's very exciting. The structure is really exciting for me. So that's why I put it at number 1. Anyway, those are the books that I read for Octofinals. I don't think I'm going to read anything for Quarterfinals. I'm not part of the judge pool, so I'll be taking a break this round. But yeah, have you read any of these books? What do you think about these books? did you read for the BookTube prize in Octofinals? What did you think about your books? You know, do you have your videos? Maybe I have not checked out your videos. You can put the link down below as well if you have them. Do you have any other thoughts? Let me know, and I'll see you again in a different one. So until then, take care, thanks for watching, and bye!